Hey, and welcome back to Long Thoughts with Baloo. I've been out of commission for a while because my recorder crapped out, but it's all fixed now. And here we are with a review of Five Torches Deep. A little backstory on this. The Dudders, Ben and Jessica, who make Five Torches Deep, were nice enough to send me a copy for review right before my recorder crapped the bed. So while it was originally going to be a first impressions review, I am lucky enough to have been able to run 2 sessions with it now, so I guess it's a post-impressions review? I'm not really sure. But anyway, the Dudders are fantastic. Separate from the review, they have been wonderful to me outside of this. They've been really patient. I've had a bunch of questions. They've been back to me in less than an hour. Really detailed, really great, really polite. So whether or not Five Torches Deep is your thing or not, they're really cool people, and I just feel like they need praise. Anyway, Five Torches Deep. I'm going to do a little nugget of review up front, and then I'll go into further detail after that. If you've only got a couple minutes, I'll put the audio equivalent of a too long didn't read right here up front. It is a OSR adaptation of 5e, which is to say it takes out a lot of the big fluffy bits of 5th edition that you don't necessarily need and interjects a bunch of OSR bones. It's 48 pages if you count the character sheet, and let's face it, I would. It's a landscape book, which is to say it's nowhere near as tall as your average tabletop RPG book, but it's got all the pretty art one expects, all the concepts. The spine is made so the book lays flat on the table, which is really, really wonderful. So, up front, the core differences between it and 5e. Your PCs will be mechanically weaker. They're mostly through their ability scores. On average, the ability scores of a Five Torches Deep character will be much lower than a 5th edition character. Proficiency bonuses scale exactly the same, but apply in fewer instances. Hit points are similar to 5e, but damage is higher. Default DC for almost everything is DC 11. Punch the dragon in the eyeball, 11. Pick the lock, 11. Push the boulder out of the way, 11. There are no dump stats, none. In most cases, both the score and the modifier carry some mechanical weight across all 6 stats that apply to most characters. There are some new mechanics and some re-tinkered with old ones. Some OSR infusion into the 5e. Danger is real. If your PCs fail a couple of saves in a row, they could just die. They could potentially just fall over. It suggests a certain degree of ignore the dice. It relies on a certain amount of player ingenuity, cleverness, and cunning. Brute forcing your way through an encounter in Five Torches Deep is a good way to get hurt. It demands a thoughtful approach that minimizes the need to roll, since every time you roll dice, you are including the chance to fail said roll. So it rewards player ingenuity. Magic is haphazard. It's Five Torches Deep suggests that magic can be plenty common, but wielding it with any consistency is risky and dangerous. There's a magical mishap table that can do horrible, horrible things to your players, most of which isn't damage. It's worse than that, like all non-magical metal in 50 feet melting, that kind of thing. There's a significant collection of the game dedicated to travel and resources. Morale, light, rations, rough wilderness, that kind of thing. A straight-on quick primer. Core mechanics are based off of 5e, so if you have a bunch of 5e books, and so if you got off drive-thru or whatever, you can use it all with this game, with minimal adaptation. In most cases, no adaptation. There are 4 OSR-related classes, 4 OSR common races. There are race and class restrictions. There you've got your core 6 stats. The armor class is ascending, not descending. You roll hit points and abilities. Skills are reduced and simplified. Magic system has been flattened and retooled. There are only 6 levels of spells, including cantrips, in this book. It's semi-compatible with 5e math and older first editions, 0 edition math. There's load and encumbrance as major noticeable mechanics. It incorporates advantages and disadvantages popularized in 5e in a big way. Rest and healing is there and reliable, but is very slow. Your equipment can break, and this is a huge deal. Your ability scores determine a lot of your mechanical limits, and it has retainers, morale, and reactions to morale in the game as core mechanics. with all that out of the way, here we go into the main description that'll be a bit longer. Up front, so apologize for the sniffles, allergies. I'm not going to die or anything like that. There are 4 PC races: human, dwarf, elf, halfling. Seen it before, right? 3 of them, which is to say not the humans, have class restrictions. Humans don't. Humans roll 3d6 straight down and swap up to 2 of them. Dwarves, elves, and halflings each get 2 stats that are set at 13, and you roll the rest at 2d6 plus 3 straight down. And they need certain stats to be at 13 in order for them to take a certain class. This is their way of showcasing that humans are adaptable and the other races are less so. This isn't necessarily anything new, but I do like how simple it is when it's presented. Their score and modifier table. It has a negative modifier, so if you have a score of 3, you have a negative modifier of 4. If you have 18 or higher, you have a positive modifier of 4, and everything else in the middle. 10, 11, you break even, right? The level chart, levels only go to 9 and 5 torches deep, and the level chart's really, really clean and makes perfect sense, which is really nice. Classes there are 4: warrior, thief, mage, zealot, which is their version of the cleric or the priest. I love how they do this. You get 9 levels. At first level, you'll get a certain amount of rolls on a sundry table: ropes, mirrors, chains, that kind of thing. All the miscellaneous stuff your players are going to buy. But you don't buy it, you just get it. Each class gets a certain number of rolls, which changes based on the class, and a pile of equipment. The thief gets, light armor and a ranged weapon and some ammunition and some poison and some thief kit right out of the box. Then they get their starting hit points, which you don't roll for. Everybody starts with maximum hit points for their thing and their con mod. So thieves get 4 plus a con mod. Warriors get 6 plus their con mod. They get a certain amount of proficiencies and weapons and all that, and they'll end up with 2 ability proficiencies right out of the gate. Thieves start proficient in dex and intelligence checks. All of them. Which is a big bubble. They are also proficient with tools, which I think is a really cool idea. It's very vague. So your thief you could roleplay that as vaguely as your thief has the same proficiency with a spatula and a tinker's hammer as he does with a lockpick set. Or you could be as restrictive as you want to be. I love how they do classes. There are 9 levels. Each level, you're going to get something. At first level, it's your equipment and your hit points. At second level, it'll be a class feature unique to you. Like warriors get counterattack. Then at level 3, you'll pick an archetype, which I think is a wonderful idea and breaks down the 5e cleric classes even more to be specific. So a warrior can become a barbarian, a fighter, or a ranger. At level 3, he picks one of those archetypes. Within each archetype, there are usually, depending on the class and the archetype, there are 5 to 7 options you might take. You're going to, like barbarians can crit on a 19 or a 20 in melee, or they can become immune to fear, that kind of thing. You take one of those. At level 7, you take one more in the same archetype you chose at level 3. After that, that's it. This makes these choices really, really important, and all of these are cool stuff. They're really cool. The choice feels weighted, and I really, really love that. At level 4, you're getting ability score increase. And then at level 5, you'll get another class feature specific to you. At 6, another ability score archetype, another ability score increase. Then at 7, your archetype bonus. Then at 8, another ability score bonus. And then at 9, something really fancy for your class, which is really cool stuff. Like mages get the ability to take one spell they know that goes up to level 3 and turn it into a cantrip. That is a huge deal, and I'll get into why in a minute. Equipment is really simplified. They break everything down into martial and simple and melee and ranged, right? And basic damage. There's a chart. Clubs are 1d6 plus strength mod, one-handed, simple, melee, bludgeoning. They break them down into kind of keywords that you build off of from there, which I really, really like. Armor is really simple, right? It's all here. You've got everything from the javelin to the thrown dart to the lumber axe. They specify arming sword. You've got a whole bunch of options in here. But they're all simplified so that no one's hurting their head trying to remember. There's not going to be any weird dice in here. Load and encumbrance. Load is a concept in Five Torches Deep that they use to keep track of how much things weigh. Five Torches Deep takes the mentality that it matters less how much a thing actually weighs. It matters less that it weighs 5 pounds. It matters that you can carry it. So load is a kind of an abstract concept. They, like weapons that are one-handed, weigh one load, no matter how big or awkward they are, because they're obviously not that awkward if your player character can wield it with one hand. If they need 2 hands, they're 2 load. Flat, even, no argument about it. Anything that isn't an armor or a weapon, right, is broken down into each item the size of a human head, or 5 pounds is considered to be 1 load. Your strength score is directly related to how much load you can carry. Heavy armor's 5, light armor's 2. Nice, simple. Magic items. A PC can only equip and use magic items equal in number to their charisma modifier, which means if you have a mod of +1, you get 1 magic item that you can attune to at all, which I think is a really, really restrictive idea, and so far at our table it's made for really, really careful player decision, and we're really loving that. We're really loving the load, too. I've had a couple of players step forward and say that they appreciate that the Swiss Army character doesn't exist in Five Torches Deep, because you just can't carry a whole crap ton of stuff. You just can't do it. Everything weighs. In cases of split, round towards the nearest load, not strictly up or down. Supply is another concept in Five Torches Deep. Supply is also abstract. The idea is that is equal to your intelligence score, making intelligence score useful to everybody, not just to people who use it for spells. It's how much the PC can resupply the stuff they brought. It kind of represents their ability to plan ahead. So the smarter character can just MacGyver more stuff out of his backpack. It doesn't really let you make quantum equipment. If you find, I don't know, a backpack on your travels, and then the backpack gets hit with an arrow from a goblin, and you're like, I want to use some supply to replace the backpack. Yeah, it's not really designed for that. But if you're firing arrows at those goblins and you run out and you have some supply, you can be like, I think I can whip something up, guys. Hold on. And there you go. It doesn't necessarily cover how long it should take to replace supply, to use supply to convert it into gear. It does give you an example of what kinds of gear cost to turn through supply. So like arrows, 1 fight's worth, or 10 arrows, it says, is 1 supply. A smith's kit is 1 use, and that's 2 supply. Quicksilver, 1 application is 5 supply. Some of the supply feels an awful lot like highway robbery, which isn't so much, it seems unfair, but think about what you're letting your players do. You're letting them turn practically thin air into replacement gear. So if that gear is really, really rare or really, really expensive, the supply should probably hurt. 5 supply equals 1 load. So supply itself isn't quantum, it has weight. They've got rules for foraging, for broken materials. If you have something that takes damage, which might happen when it's used as part of a check for attack or defense, say, it might take sundering damage. If that happens, its durability will go down. Little things, soft things like boiled leather, 2 durability. Magic or heavy metal things like a steel breastplate, 5 durability. When things take damage, that durability score drops. You can repair a thing, which takes time, and they have a table for that. Right next to the crafting table. Yay, crafting. You can fix your stuff when it's damaged, not when it's broken, which I think is a useful idea. Once it's broken, it's broke. You got to get a new one. They handle saves and checks as basically the same thing. They're essentially the same thing in Five Torches Deep, and I think that's very simplistic, and I love it. Anything to make the gameplay faster. Initiative is based on your dex score. You don't roll for that. If Jimmy Dean has 18 decks, and he's got the most decks of anyone at the table, Jimmy Dean goes first every turn. They argue that you should make a big deal out of positioning. Stealth and range are a huge deal in tactical superiority. PC attacks are broken down just like they are in your traditional game. Critical hits, double damage. Critical fail only happens when you roll a nat 1 on a check that damages a player character. They'll take double damage. Nice, simple. I love how they handle death and injury. Falling over, hitting 0, not a big deal. Getting up off the floor, big deal. There's an injury table with 10 results, none of which are good for you. One of which is false hope. You just die. Now that sounds terrible, but first somebody has to stabilize you, then they have to roll on a 20-sided die, and then they have to roll a 1. The probable odds of that happening are not good. There'll be another example of that. Yeah, this is really bad, but it basically never happens roll in the magic section, which I'll get to. Healing and hit points. They suggest you use a lot of consumables, potions, magic plants, herbs, whatever. But from straight healing from taking a nap, say, a PC gets 1 hit point per level per night in safe rest. That's not bunches. If you're getting unsafe rest, a dungeon, hostile wilderness, whatever, that's just 1 hit point, no matter what level you are. So, but this will happen every time you get to sleep. So healing is reliable. It's just not very potent. Some of these injuries can last for weeks at a time. Some of them are permanent. I love their mentality on traps and traps and pacing. They don't really give you rules so much for traps and pacing as a suggestion that you don't gotcha your players, that you respect them in that regard. If you're going to throw traps at them, forewarn them. Have a dead adventurer, a click sound. If you're going to have a rope snare, snap. Right, those are fun. They have a section for travel turns, and travel broken down over land, over water, rough terrain. And a lot of that stuff really can affect your player character's success and speed in a big way, but with simple math. 10 plus strength mod miles. That's it. Nice and simple, but difficult terrain then can mess with that. Harsh terrain can quarter it, that kind of thing. They have a big section on light, 4 light levels in 5 Torches Deep, all of which can majorly affect your PC's ability to perform actions. In complete darkness, sight checks just don't happen. It's not going to happen. They're impossible. But dark vision's a thing, which flips all the charts, and a really cool idea. This means that if your players end up with some guys with dark vision and some with not, you could make for some really interesting encounters there. Side note, races do not have inherent mechanical bonuses other than the change in starting dice they use to make stats. That's it. There's no, there's no earth sense with dwarves. There's no dark vision with a halfling. There isn't none of that. There's a travel turn table, so should you, not have something prepared or you don't have a table that you already like, you can roll and come up with something on the spot. They have a rolling to return mechanic that I really like. Say you guys have to wrap up early, or the game got away from you, or whatever, and you're underground in the middle of it, and you're like, I don't really want to pick up right here, right? I don't want to have to set the minis back out, whatever your reason is. You just roll to return. Everybody picks, they roll a check with the mod equal to their highest modifier, including proficiency. Then the GM decides whether or not it's dangerous or arduous. Each have their own drawback. Roll. See if you beat it. That's it. And then you're back and at the campsite or wherever you were returning to. If you made the check, all's well. If you didn't make the check, a different kind of damage happens depending on whether or not it was dangerous or arduous. Nice, simple chase rules. They're brilliant. I don't want to ruin, I don't want to read the whole book to you, but they're brilliant. Dark sight or dark vision, whatever you like better, and the light is handled very well in little blocky tables. So there's a section for retreat, which is really cool, both for your PCs and for their enemies. Resilience and exhaustion is a concept in 5 Torches Deep. Each PC has resilience equal to their con score, which is representative of the number of hours they can travel without getting all exhausted and crap, which is really cool, and it makes con stat matter to everyone, particularly if you play a game where time isn't something your players have a never-ending abundance of. If the world doesn't wait for them, then that's a huge thing that steps up against their agency and doesn't take it away from them. It pressures them, which I think is really cool. Exhaustion is really bad. You suffer disadvantage on all checks, and your movement speed drops to 0. Yeah, 0. That's a huge deal. They have a section on corruptions, which is a blanket term for poisons, diseases, venoms, which is really, really wonderful. Their spellcasting section is a bit different from 5e. They treat magic items that are consumable, such as scrolls, wands. I imagine a ring of wishes would be considered a consumable. Those don't count towards the amount of items you can carry. You can only attune to a certain number of. You can only attune to one item at a time. You can know any spells you know for your level. So at first level, you know 1 first level spell. At third level, you know 3 first level spells. Those spells you can cast an infinite number of times a day, as long as you have the components to power them, and you don't screw up the save. In Five Torches Deep, spellcasting has a save or a check, whichever term you like better, equal to DC 10 plus the spell's level. This means that just all spells are psychologically and mechanically offensive. In 5th edition, a lot of spells, when you target somebody else, a hostile entity, they get a save. They roll against your spell checking ability. That's not what happens in Five Torches Deep. You roll a 20-sided die that both covers their armor. You have to hit their armor class, and you have to beat this spell check. It's one roll. At least with my players, that creates a psychology of aggression. You are not letting them defend. You're assaulting them. It doesn't sound like a big difference, but psychologically it's done a lot for our players. The magical mishap table, which is what happens if you roll under your spellcasting save, has 10 possible results, one of which is straight damage to the caster, more than half of which is bad for everyone, one of which is actually kind of positive. I'm not going to give this table away, but I think it's very well balanced. I think the possible odds of your caster just getting killed from it are miserably low, which I think is really cool. Because while your players will feel like they could die at any moment, they actually can't, not from their own magic. Converting spells from other sources, whether that be original D&D, or White Wolf, or Lamentations of the Flame Princess, or anything, into converting those spells into Five Torches Deep is really easy. They have a section for it, but basically, as long as it's not a cantrip that deals damage, use it as it is. It's really, really great stuff. Focuses are crazy awesome. Focuses remove the need for components just like they do in other games, and the requirement to need a freehand for spellcasting. So for a caster, a focus is a huge deal. Since components, you could come up with them individually, or you could use them with your supply stat. 2 per level of spell. So a first level spell costs 2 supply, a second level spell costs 4 supply. This means that your spellcaster will need lots of supply, which mechanically adds up. His intelligence score will probably be higher, and the amount of armor and stuff he's carrying with him won't be. So we'll have a bunch of supply to go around, which is really cool. But I love the agency involved in that. 2 nice spell lists, Arcane and Divine, 6 levels including cantrips, 5 in each level. 1 word, maybe 2 lines of text per spell. Brilliant. I love how simple this is. They have a section for retainers, which they separate retainers from henchmen, right, which are bigger and better, both of which care about your charisma score and your modifier. Orders, there's a section on orders you can give them. You can command your retainers, doing everything from letting them focus fire and getting additional attack power, to getting additional armor, to moving and attacking. You can control them to a very large extent. There's rules for renown that your players have and how the reactions happen to them. A section on monster math, which covers both converting monsters from other games, regardless of what that game is. The game is very, very compatible with D&D across the ages, and therefore anything that runs off of it. Any D20 system, you could turn a monster from it into Five Torches Deep in probably 5 or 10 minutes, with the monster math table in front of you. It also covers the creation of your own monsters through a couple of techniques and category descriptions. There's a section on tactics for your monsters. It's great stuff. Five Torches Deep gives out experience based on per gold piece obtained. It's a direct. So if you got 10 gold, you got 10 experience. Nice, simple. If you haven't noticed, I love what's simple and fast. I have large groups of players, and we love to just keep the ball moving, keep the action going. If I take more than 30 seconds to make a decision, I feel bad about it. Monster alignment. Five Torches Deep largely ignores alignment. and pretty much only cares about it with like detect evil spells for what they call, and I love this, capital E evil, which are regulated to literal manifestations of cruelty and sadism. Demons, devils, necromancers, undead, aberrations, that kind of thing. This means that by default, mortal creatures, humans, bears, dwarves, horses, aren't and cannot be evil. So Five Torches Deep largely ignores alignment. They have a section on building monsters that I already mentioned, but they have a couple of examples in it, and I wanted to point that out, and I think that's really wonderful, so you can get a feel for if you're doing it right. There are 2 pages for the GM's section, just 2, but I think they're really, really wonderful. There's a section on framework and preparation, which is really well broken down. So you've got your preparation notes, right? Your incitement, your fork, your obstacle, your threat, who directly opposes the party's goals, right? Who's the pain in the butt, and the climax and resolution. And they explain how you might pace out the actions the player characters have made up to this point through each nugget. On the next page is a section on principles, which I think should be in every D&D book ever. A fair challenge. They suggest that you be brutally fair, even to a fault. Your job isn't to protect or challenge the PCs in some kind of plot line. Instead, you present a challenging world full of threat and consistency. And let the PCs die if they don't treat the world with the respect it commands. Which is to say, if your PCs notice that the big scary ogre can probably tear them in half, because they just watched it tear 4 guardsmen bigger and tougher than they are in half, and they engage in martial combat with it, open brazen combat, let the ogre tear them apart. Principles, because your player choice should matter. Impact and ingenuity, if your player choices are brilliant, right? If they come up with something really crafty, let them have that impact. They'll love you for it. Meaningful choices. They suggest that there's really no meta plot. There's no 3-act structure. There's just choice, action, and reaction. That means there's not necessarily any right answer. But if your players do, well, they want to feel clever. They want to win. So give them a difficult challenge. So when they drop it, when it's a hard-fought, bloody fight, it tastes way better than one they're like, well, I mean, I guess that was fun. Internal consistency is a big deal. The facilitating of play, they've got a little sidebar on that the GM wears many hats. The host, the rules keeper, the arbiter of social structure. And I think it's a really wonderful passage that everybody should read. I love their block on discovery. People don't care about discovery. People don't care about exploration. They care about discovery. There's a bunch of hallways, and you go down the mall, and you end up finding nothing. And this happens many times. You will stop going down hallways. The average player will, anyway. People like finding things. They don't necessarily like looking for things if they never find anything. There are 2 pages for generation of entire plot lines and maps. So there's a connections and descriptor table. Everything from senses, it's brilliant. There's noxious fumes, wafting rust, to actions, biting, stabbing, emotions, ecstasy, trust, contempt, things and fallouts, right? Deities and monarchs and famine and upheaval. And a page for random map generation, which you could use a 6-sided puzzle cube. Most of you probably know that as a Rubik's Cube. But if you don't have one of those, I certainly don't have one of those. I can't stand those things. No offense if you love them. You can roll 96 and convert each die's result to colors. So 1 is white, open path, entrance or clearing. Green is a key destination. They've got 6 colors and 6 things those colors mean. You roll the dice or you roll the cube, you're good to go. And then the last couple of pages are a quick reference. In case I didn't say so, the book is landscape and it lays almost completely flat on a table, which is really, really great. And I cannot spout enough about the formatting of this book. It is so well put together. It's a joy to read. It's a joy to digest. It's a joy to look at. It's brilliant. They managed to make a book that's shorter and wider. It's landscape, not smaller, than your average D&D book. It is thinner. It's only like 48 pages, but it's the same dimensions. So you get all the lovable art you usually get, plus a more digestible experience. And it's 48 pages, not 300 and change. The quick reference pages, lay flat behind my GM screen when I run. It's got everything you need, everything in the entire book. The sundries table, the magical mishap table, the travel table, monsters, PCs, combat, you name it. It's all here. The only thing I wish was here that isn't is the table your players roll on when they pick themselves up off the floor. Two things in the Dutter's favor, though. I can't really see anything that I would have chosen to not include in a comprehensive quick reference that's here to make space for that table. Because the quick reference here is well formatted, but it does take up the entire 2 pages. So there's really no space left over. And the second thing, I can see how one might call that table the player's responsibility. So, not really a fault, just a little thing that bugs me. The character sheet is brilliantly designed. You've got a section for your archetype and your name and your class and your race and all that stuff. Proficient checks, spells, notes, inventory, blah, blah, blah. But what I want to talk about is how the stats are arranged on the page. There's a horizontal column, strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, blah, blah, right? And then there are a horizontal row, and there are vertical columns beneath them that drop below each stat. So under strength, there's a box where it says melee, right? And for your melee bonuses. And underneath that, a box that says weapons and damage that extends into the dexterity column next to it. Because in many cases, your weapons might use both, or one or the other. And underneath strength is load, and and then you're at the bottom. So strength covers melee, weapons and damage, and load. Under constitution, there's your hit points, your resilience. Under wisdom, there's your passive perception, which is just like 5e, your morale, your divine goodies, right? So what you're looking at, and I'll see if the Dutters let me post a picture there. What you're looking at is a kind of a visual flow chart of which each stat uses straight down, what each stat controls. And I think this is a really great idea. Now, the Dutters have gone out of their way to make a wonderful adaptation of 5e if you're looking for the zero to hero, high lethality, low crunch experience. If you're looking to play big damn heroes, right? Which is a lot of fun. 5 Torches Deep won't give you that up front. You'll have to gain some levels. Even if you start at level 9, 5 Torches Deep's suggestion is mechanics. I don't know if they'd hold up for that for long distances. But if you're looking to play an old school dungeon crawler, or even a modern day game where you spend a lot of your time above ground, politics here, alchemy stations and wizards towers and intrigue drama there, NPC, blah, blah, blah. If you don't play a dungeon crawly kind of game, but you want high lethality and danger, if you want your players to hold their breath when they roll the dice, 5 Torches Deep will give you that. I cannot recommend it enough. It is a real joy to read. It's a real joy to play. I had a couple of players that I were confident were kind of going to hate it, and they didn't. They loved it. It is such a joy to read. I can't believe the Dutters made such a brilliant thing, just the two of them. They absolutely deserve your money. So go to DriveThruRPG right now and buy a copy of this. It's cheap, it's wonderful, and you need to get some. Hey, thanks for coming to Long Thoughts with Baloo. This has been a longer show than normal. Thanks so much for listening. Later days.